Welcome to But Jesus Drank Wine.
And other stories that kept us stuck. I'm Mead.
And I'm Christy.
In this podcast, we'll explore the stories that kept us, stuck, wanting to drink and not wanting to drink all at the same time.
Join us as we show you that freedom from alcohol does not have to mean a life sentence of misery and missing out,
but actually means living an authentic life full of peace, joy, and purpose.
Hey gals, how are we doing today?
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm so excited to be here with y'all.
Oh my gosh, we are so excited to have you, Karla. So we are joined today by our friend and fellow coach in this freedom from alcohol space, Karla Adkins.
Whoop, whoop.
She is the co-founder of Zero Proof Life. She is the author of her beautiful book, and she came tumbling down. She's also the first person that gave me the actual hope that I could take my dream of writing a book and make it a reality when we connected a few years ago. Now, that dream is not a reality for me yet, but it's I will always be grateful for that conversation that we had and connecting over that. And here you are, birthed this beautiful, beautiful book, from your beautiful story. And we're so grateful that you're joining us this morning to share your story and talk about all the things.
Thank you. It means so much. I remember that conversation, and I remember we just couldn't stop talking. And it was in the middle of writing, which it's you when you're writing a book, you cannot even imagine, you just can't imagine it being ever finished and ready to go and out into the world. And before you know it, it is. And so it came out September of 22. So it's been out for a little while, and it has been such an amazing journey, just kind of putting that out into the world and really still in disbelief that I'm actually at that place where I shared my whole story with everyone. So it comes in many layers, just kind of that realization, but beautiful healing that comes with it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I would love to share for anybody that has a story inside of them. I thought I was healed and free and doing great. I didn't know the deeper layers that still needed to come. And that's with just kind of really releasing and putting, those things that you kept to yourself for so long and only maybe, kept to yourself and then maybe even shared with a few. But to then get to the place where you're like, here it is. This is my junk. This is my skeletons in my closet. And it adds a whole different layer of healing. And that's what I've seen happen in myself. So it's been a really cool journey.
The courage that it takes to share that story and to write. And Christy's just wrapped writing her book, turned into her manuscript.
Well, the very first draft, which... Karla, did you feel like this when you handed in your first manuscript? I was like, I don't know. I feel like I could potentially burn it and hand my advance back. And I don't want to see it. I don't want to read it.
Oh,
it's so many feelings.
You will not want to read it. And I'm like, I remember asking, people in that field, is this normal? I don't want to read what I just wrote, but just know this cool thing of the molding and shaping, and the first draft has to happen. Right. Yeah. And then you kind of go from there. And it's also, again, talk about vulnerability, and feeling raw, when you hand that over and the time that it takes for people to get back to you, you're like,
yeah, that's where I am right now. That's literally where I am right now. I'm like, oh gosh, I overshared.
Well, if you need any support, you just reach out to me.
I'm going to.
Please do.
Well, thanks, babe.
Please do. And yeah. And it's been such a beautiful gift in getting it out. Because obviously when you write a book, and especially with my story, and I know we'll get into that, but you have a person in mind, right? Mm-hmm. And my story around alcohol takes such a dark turn. It takes such a dark, scary turn when it comes to my health and it almost taking my life. And going into liver failure. So it's not a pretty story. And so obviously I had the me in mind, I had that person laying in that hospital bed where all the plates that I've been trying to spin just came tumbling down, hence where I got this word from, but the title from. And so I had this person that I wanted to bring hope and obviously, share and just say, you can do this. It doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to be your ending. But the coolest thing as it's come out, as the different readers have come up to me, and I will also say there's nothing like writing a book like that and getting phone calls from people you haven't heard from in probably 5 to 10 years. And when you see their name, you're like, I think I know what this is about.
Oh no.
But it's beautiful. But I didn't know how many people that it would touch. And that was an unexpected gift. People that came up to me, I've just taken up pickleball as a fun thing. Like,
oh, it's so fun.
oh my God, I'm obsessed.
Guys, we need to retreat for pickleball.
Okay.
Right?
Sign me up.
Right?
It's just been a great way for me to get out, move my body, get around people. And, yes. And so I have had, people come up to me and just, really talk about that drinking's not really, an issue per se for them, but they recognize the language and the narrative and how much alcohol is around us all the time. And came up to me and would say, you know what, you gave me the strength to say, you know what, I don't really want to drink tonight, guys, because again, that boozy culture where they was like, I felt as a grown adult, this peer pressure to drink. And I would go and, with the intention of not, and I didn't want to drink. You gave me the voice to say no. I had someone else say, you know what, your description of giving alcohol a job, it made me stop reaching for wine at night when I was frustrated with my kids.
Ooh,
That gives me chills. So that was an unexpected. And I think it's the beauty of a book and it's the beauty of storytelling and sharing those getting real, raw pieces of yourself. Then people can see themselves in you and go, wait a minute. So that has been such a gift because again, and I just have to go, like, I'm so excited to be on this podcast because I love y'all's podcast. And I loved, you had a recent one on anxiety and I just really dove in on that. But even at the beginning of your podcast where you say this, not drinking doesn't have to be a life of misery and it can actually be peace and joy. Obviously I'm not quoting that directly, but it's that and that's what I want to come through in my story. It's like, I was so afraid. I held onto it so tight for so long because I had this picture of misery. I had this picture of not realizing, girl, your life is pretty miserable right now. If you really want to take a look at it.
Yeah.
And, but I want people to know, oh my gosh, this is amazing on the other side. And I'm doing things that I never thought I was capable of. Oh my God, being on a podcast and talking, no, sharing my life, in a journey and sharing all of my story, no. But even just, again, just the little things, being the mom that I'm able to be, just, it changes you. And we have to talk about it more so people realize that.
Yeah.
So true. And I think about too, how you say that, like, you wrote this with that one person in mind, and yet to see that ripple effect that it has, from people just coming up to you and saying, oh, so-and-so, whatever it is. And it's making me rethink this. And, we started, I think all of us as coaches, for that same thing. Like, if there's one person out there that can hear, something in my story and I can coach them through freedom, to get to freedom from alcohol, then that is enough. That is why I put myself out there vulnerably and share. That is all worth it. And then, and then seeing how, these stories that we have that keep us stuck, that are, in our mind, in our brain, that are driving the show behind the scenes of our lives. It's nothing short of amazing to be able to hear that in somebody else. Like, so we can start identifying what those stories are for us that are keeping us stuck in the drinking cycle. So we can start, bringing, digging out of the shame hole that we feel that we're in because of all the things. And so I would love if our listeners could hear from you, kind of like, where does your story begin? And if you could walk us through it, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it goes back to anxiety. And that's why I loved, and I think it was Christine Bulware that you had on, just a powerful,
Yes.
beautiful story about anxiety. Definitely heard myself a lot in her story.
Yes.
But so my anxiety started for me in high school, and but I would say in college is where really my drinking story would begin. That's where I take it back to, and that's because I describe it as I started giving alcohol a job,
Yeah.
and it became my thing that helped me with my anxiety. And let's face it, that's the dangerous, scary thing about alcohol is that initially, when you're in that minute, you're in that moment of panic, it is so painful, and you'll do whatever to get out of that feeling. And something works. You're like, hey, this not only does this work, this is what everybody does. I mean, win-win, right? And
Yeah.
so I was thinking, this is great. Plus, you hear that message everywhere. We've been sold that lie for so long that, this is what helps. Relax, have a glass of wine. So that belief around alcohol is deeply rooted. And it's rooted, before we even start drinking. We kind of have this, oh, I just know that it drinks. You don't know where it comes from. It's just there. And so that's where I can see myself, like, we'll give it a job. And then those jobs I started giving it raises, and I started giving promotions. Like, well, if you help with this, you can help with that too. I'm pretty insecure socially. And so, you know what? I'm going to see if this works for this. And it did. Never really taking a look at, okay, how did I feel afterwards? Or, did it, was my anxiety gone? Why was my anxiety amplifying? Never really thought to, ask myself those questions. And again, it's why I share my story. And I think it's also a beautiful, beautiful way for parents to talk about alcohol, with their kids. I feel like that giving it a job description can make
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
I was just so honored. My sister, my niece just went to college, and she used the job thing with her daughter, and it clicked with her. And because not only could she see that and go, wait a minute, I don't want to give it this job to make me feel better about myself, or, again, anxiety or whatever it may be, she could also see people then giving it a job. And it brings an awareness, when you give it that
Yeah.
kind of simple, term. So that's why
I
I
love
love
it.
using that. And I feel like when we give it a job, and that's why there's a chapter called Roots in my book. I think that's when it gets feet. That's when it kind of starts to dig in, because we start to use that tool. We've got this tool in our back pocket, and we're not, and because it's so highly addictive, we're not realizing we're slowly getting ourselves in trouble. And, in the book, I talk about, I share stories of what that looked like for me. And then, really became a successful young adult. And again, had the picture in my mind. I can't have a problem with alcohol because you know what? I'm young, I'm successful.
Mm.
I was in sales and did well. Um, I was doing great in life, and so again, it's not this picture of a person that's struggling, but I wasn't looking at that deeper picture. I was waking up every day miserable. Um, and, promising starting to have that internal worry. And it's why I don't like to use the word alcoholic in my language, because that's something that I was always taught. And, I always tell people too, like, if you want that word in your life, then 100% use it. I just feel like as a society, we've got to normalize not using it, because
Agreed.
this is my reason
Totally.
why.
Mm-hmm.
I see it as such a barrier to people getting help. They'll say, well, I'm not
100%.
that. And that's what I
Yeah.
did for years. I'm like,
Same.
well,
100%. Me too.
what? So for years, y'all, we're
Yes.
sitting there going against that one word, when it's
Mm-hmm.
like, wait a minute, why am I not looking and going, oh my gosh, I am ridden with anxiety? Then, this is what, is the problem with alcohol too. It muddies the waters. And so then we start to have physical issues like, panic attacks or GI issues. And I'm like, I just don't, I didn't know what it was like to feel good anymore. Um, And, just to kind of like, for time reasons, I'll just say, as I progressed and as the drinking just became more of my go-to, because so many people, when they hear my story and how sick I got, they were like, what were the signs? What
Mhm.
did you see? And honestly, when you're at that point, I didn't know what it was like to feel good anymore. So I didn't, looking back, I can see my body was like, girl, I am not doing good. Like something's got to give here. But my anxiety really looked very physical and it made me feel sick. So they were so intermeshed. I didn't know the difference. Um, and when everything came tumbling down, it was truly, and I still think about it. It goes back to people pleasing and being that girl that I was just going to get through this, push through this one more thing, and then I'll address it. Um, and it's one of my favorite chapters in the book, and it's called Yellow. And it's uh, because you see it coming and you see the drop coming of everything falling out. And it truly was this fear that I had. And I was in a wedding. I'm like, how the how I made it down that aisle, like knowing how sick my body was, just again, but I couldn't say no to people. Um, it was just this day I had gotten ready for work before this wedding, and I looked in the rearview mirror, and that had become a habit of mine. And I love to tell that specific story because I'm not alone in that, where I would look at the whites of my eyes. And again, talk about your subconscious trying to tell you like how deeply I was worried about my drinking, because the fact of I was doing that. I
Yeah.
knew deep down my body wasn't doing well, but I just couldn't go there, and I was too scared to go there. And so one morning I went and looked and I saw yellow, and the fear was just it was paralyzing almost. But again, even then, I've got to push through, I've got to do this. And after that is when I feel like my body truly just said, I can't do this anymore. And I went into acute liver failure. And so my then boyfriend at the time, I dedicated the book at the beginning to my amazing husband and beautiful daughter, because he was just my boyfriend at the time and could have been running for the hills, and actually a physician also. So again, that's a whole other topic, just the idea of like what the person that goes into acute liver failure and who that is and what that person looks like. And
Sorry,
and
Karla, how old are you at this point in the
okay,
story?
great
Sorry.
question. I
Yeah.
think at that point I was 36.
Yeah, so
And I
young.
think I'm so glad you asked that question, because I think that's, again, it's so important for people to realize, because I was still also hanging on to so many beliefs around, I'm young, I'm doing,
Yes.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
I've got time to figure this out,
Mhm.
and those kind of things don't come till later on. And again, a big drive, y'all, to me writing this book is so many things, but was what happened over the pandemic, and seeing the studies and hearing what was coming out and what happened to me years ago, as a young woman, was now happening in droves in young
Mhm.
women, where normally when people think liver failure, it's an older man, thing that happens.
Mhm.
And, now they're seeing young women, and there's a huge rise. And I just knew, I was like, I cannot be quiet about this anymore. So yeah, I think it's important we talk about age, because again, it goes along with those beliefs. Like, okay, I'm young, I've got this.
Yeah.
That can't happen to me.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, like, this can't happen to me. And I believe me, I was saying that to myself as they took me to, actually, it's in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. It's a smaller hospital. And that's when I saw, like, my whole body turned, yellow. And it was like my body just said, I cannot do this anymore. I cannot keep pushing through. I can't, and they had to take me by ambulance from that ER to the Medical University of South Carolina, where again, they were, and I was still hanging on because they were asking me how much I was drinking. That's another question I can't stand. How
Yeah.
much I'm
Yeah.
drinking. And I just, I was lying. I was not being truthful. And it's because of shame. I wanted to bury myself. Could not believe that my secret was out. I couldn't hide this anymore. Now, physically, my body is failing. Um, they actually allowed me to go home with the promise of getting blood work done in a few days, because they wanted to just see if my body would get back in check and that sort of thing. And I went to the lab, got my blood work done, and I'll never forget getting the phone call. And what happens, for healthcare providers when there's critical labs come in where they're dangerous labs, they get a call immediately from the lab. And so it's not like the normal process where you might hear in a few days. They let them know immediately. And I got a call, and it was actually from Dr. Joplin. She wrote the foreword of the book, which is, again, that whole story makes me teary eyed. And I can tell I'm going to get emotional talking about it. And I always get emotional about this conversation because I was laying in bed and just sleeping. And she said, "Is this Miss Kephart?" That was my, a maiden name. And she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I think I'm dying." And she said, "I think you are too."
Oh
And
my
it
gosh.
just, whoosh, like, I every story, everything that I've been trying to control was just on the floor at my feet, and say, "I'm dying." And then she said, "Can you get here? And if not, we need to send an ambulance to you." Again, whoosh, like this realization, y'all, of how serious this was and how I could die. And Grady left work immediately. He called my parents. My parents came, had a very powerful conversation with my father, and just, looking at your dad, and they say I'm dying. And he just said, "Well, I want you to focus on living." And that's what I did. It was just, and again, so that was the crux of just this, my life forever changing. Still, then I obviously was in the hospital for a while, again, just touch and go. And writing the book too brought up a lot clearly for me, because I think we can move on from stories like that and forget just how bad it was. As coaches, we talk about fading effect bias and how that can happen anywhere in our lives. And it was just a reminder of how serious this was, like what happened to me. And just that journey in itself. So I was in the hospital for a while, and the hard part about the story is where I have to talk about going back to alcohol. And again, I'm just condensing this because I want to tell people just the big parts, and obviously they can read the book if they want the details. But when my body started to get better, obviously I left there thinking I'm never going to drink again. I've got this. But what I love is that Dr. Joplin in the foreword talks about how we sent her out back into the world saying, "You can never drink again." Yet she had no tools to do
Mm.
so. I didn't understand,
Mhm.
neuroplasticity and the ties. I didn't know anything about that. All I had heard about was this disease model, and I
Mhm.
didn't feel like I
Mhm.
had a disease. I just, either you are or you're not. And, so eventually, when life started lifing and getting hard, and I started romanticizing about alcohol again, I
Sure.
eventually went back.
Sure.
And that's where, again, it's so powerful in our coaching and how we coach and how it's different is I needed to start working on my beliefs. I needed to
Mhm.
start breaking down that belief that alcohol helped me, that alcohol served me. I needed to learn that it didn't, because I think that's another thing that we saw in the pandemic. We saw this huge percentage of people that went back to alcohol. And what
Mm.
I want to scream from the rooftops is like, it's inevitable. People then see it as this huge, like, "Oh, yep, those people relapsing." No, they just still think it serves them. They still
Yeah.
think it
Yeah.
serves them. And so when you're in this crunch of a time that's so horrible, then it's like, that's the only thing that worked for me, not realizing it never did. It never helped me with my anxiety. It only made it worse. I didn't know that science. I didn't know those things. Um, and ended up being hospitalized again and again. And I talk about this in the book, having once again, and it just, I love how God does this, how I had this new doctor who wrote the afterword. She called Dr. Joplin because she knew I was just, the shame was unbearable. Could not believe I went back to it. Didn't know why I went back to it, but just felt the shame. And Dr. Joplin didn't need, I wasn't on her patient load, but she came and saw me in my hospital room. And that conversation changed my path. It just did. The fact that she came and she sat beside me and just, told me some of her story, told me what she saw with alcohol, and got personal with me. And she says it in the foreword. She calls it her therapeutic empathy, and I think it might even be Brene Brown thing, but she had always been taught as a physician, you don't do that. It's clinical. This is what you do. And she went against it, not knowing what it would do for me that day. And I remember, and again, this is the beauty in coaching, going back to what you said earlier, Mead, about why we're doing this. She gave me hope in that sitting, and she gave me a different view. Like, she's like, Karla, you don't have to drink anymore. Have you ever thought about that? Like, and how cool that would be? And it just got me this hope. And I remember sitting there in that hospital bed going, God, I want to do that for somebody one day. What she just did for me, I want to do that for somebody. It was powerful, just looking at this young, healthy, professional woman, share a piece of her story and what it did for me. And from then on, I was on a mission. I was like, I need to figure out what happened to me. Why did I go back? I don't feel like I'm an alcoholic. Am I alone in this? Am I just in denial? I wanted to get answers, but I knew I wanted to live, and I wasn't going to if I went back to it. And also I knew I had tried other methods, more traditional methods, and that just didn't work for me. I'm very grateful that it works for other people and we have these different methods, but it just didn't work for me. So I knew I needed to find my way. And so thankful for, this whole other world of podcasts, y'all, that you're doing and how that reaches people. And I found podcasts and learning that and just drove me. And I was like, I couldn't get enough of it. Someone was finally explaining. I'd never learned what alcohol did science wise and why my anxiety was worse. So it was like getting this beautiful gift. Yeah. And peeling the shame away and understanding, stop so much looking at me as this weak, bad person and looking at the substance and going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I have been sold a lie, And so that again, it's just, that's the big version. And that's how, again, I had the drive to become alcohol free. And but then there was a long time where I wanted to, and I really, because I love this podcast so much, want to share this piece of it. Because then I was good, and but I also was keeping it to myself. And so for the first time, I became a mom. It was, and I was working, and I got invited to this Bible study in Georgetown, South Carolina. And it was the first time I had walked away from work for a little while. And it was like, I could do this Bible study. Had no clue what I was getting into. I told my sister, I'm like, yeah, I think it's a 4 to 6 week thing. No, it was a whole year. It was a year long, community Bible study. I went into the study and we're studying Matthew. And it hit me. And I talk about this, but it was about the hidden talents. And when I say it just went straight into my heart, and it was about, the master giving, the farmers the talents and how some would share it with others, or like with season would make it grow. I'm totally, because I'm not looking at the story, probably slaughtering it. But the bottom line, what resonated with me, I was the one that was buried it. I buried the gift. Gosh, this made me cry again. I buried the gift that he saved me for a reason. And because I was like, God, I am fine. I'm obedient. I'm alcohol free. I am good right now. So I don't want to talk about it though. And so I went into that Bible study telling the leader, like, I'm a private person, I don't share. And so just know I'm here and I'm signing, that's all you're going to get from me. And I've left that place with a business and a blog. And if that's not God, I don't know what else is. And this is going to make me cry even more, but I have to share this. And I've never shared this anywhere. Is that, then I was continued, the healing needed to continue for me. I always tell people, and I think it's important for people to know, like, what you're seeing me now, you're seeing me 8.5 years later. My freedom did not look like this at the beginning. It grew with time and healing and peeling those layers of shame back. And, being able to then talk about my diagnosis of cirrhosis. Again, I became a coach and I still was refusing to talk about that. So that is what healing looks like. And that, again, it takes time. And, it's giving yourself that gift to be able to do that. But I have to tell you, I was getting ready. My book was launching. Golly, it's going to make me cry. My book was launching, and obviously there's tons of nerves leading up to that day. And you know how social media can give you the time hop and these reminders of, where you were. And I had never seen this memory come up before. And it was me, oh my gosh, because it was 2017, I think, when that was it. And so years later, I'll just say, the memory was the day up to me launching the book was me walking out hand in hand with my daughter to that Bible study. And it was the most beautiful gift of him saying, I've had you this whole time. I've had you this whole time. And, every time you gave it a job, I was wanting you to look at me, but even through this process of sharing, I was there for a reason, and I feel like you can see that that's nothing that I could have planned myself. I had no idea that I was walking into that Bible study September, 6th, and would be launching my book September 7th, 5+ years, more than that, years later. And it was just a beautiful gift. And I just remember being so thankful and me knowing, like, no matter what happens with this book, I was supposed to share it. I was supposed to share it. Someone was supposed to hear it. And again, and not, because you can have so much fear, like, did I really just put everything out there? And it was just this beautiful gift of peace, of saying, this is what you were supposed to do.
Wow.
I know. It was just the coolest thing. And I haven't had the opportunity to share it. So I'm so glad I was able to do that here. And
oh, Karla, I just think about, like, all I'm picturing is you in that hospital bed when is it Joplin or Jofflin?
Joplin. Yeah.
Joplin. Yeah. Dr. Joplin comes to see you. She doesn't have to. You're not on her patient load. She makes the time to come and be with you and sit with you in your pit of shame.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And to be with you in that. And I think that is just, and that being such a pivotal moment, like, God giving you the person that could be with you in that, like Jesus does for us, and
Yes.
says, like, I can handle it. And I'm, there's nothing you can say or do, or that, like, I can handle it all and I'm here for you. And then weaving it all through the rest of your story the way, oh my gosh, it's so powerful.
It is. And I'm so glad that I still have a relationship with Dr. Joplin to this day. And it's so powerful because, again, I love it. She's so amazing because I truly spent the time of saying, like, thanking her, I would, I don't count days, but I celebrate in the years. And a lot of times I'll take the time. Sometimes I'll take the time to write her or write Dr. Allen, who wrote the afterword of the book, another huge part of my story. And she wrote for me for the book, which is such an honor. But she just looked at me. She's like, you thank me, but I need to thank you, because that I didn't realize going into that conversation, she was taking a risk. She was doing something different that was just not what they were clinically trained to do. And, got personal. And so then she took that. And so she was like, you have helped me in the way I practice around this. And anybody that has her as a physician, they are lucky. And she's still, obviously, she's a specialist just doing liver work and studying. She's a researcher. And so I'm so glad that, she's like, there's like a small army of us that, get it. And again, that could be a podcast for a whole different day, just really kind of infiltrating that world of healthcare providers and the power. She had a lot of power in that situation. It was very beautiful what she did. And it easily could have been a shaming one, So yeah. And again, that's why I knew again that my story needed to get out there, all of it, and just kind of stop sharing the bits and pieces and finally get to a place where I could share it all and also give people the hope that if it might listen, there was nothing gray area about my drinking. It was dark. It was bad, but no matter where you're at on that spectrum, of alcohol use disorder, wherever you're at on the spectrum, it's never too late. It's never too dark. There is freedom just around the corner, and it's hard. Listen, it's work. It is work, but I promise you it's worth it. It is 100% worth it.
When you said, I didn't know what it felt like to feel good anymore, I was like, that was me. That was me. I had
Yes.
no idea what it was like to wake up and actually feel okay. And so that transition of then finally starting to feel good, I was like, why would I go back? But
Right.
I think that there's so many, I was crying through your whole thing because it was just so incredibly beautiful. But I think what's so powerful is that, you were so young. You were
Yes.
so young when all this went down. And I think that even though I know it's like hard to share, the fact that you did decide to go back to it shows not the weakness in you, but the insidious nature of alcohol and how addictive it is. And I mean, it shows that it can
Amen.
basically almost take you out, and you still continue to give it all those jobs because we haven't learned any other way.
Yes.
And so, I mean, Karla, I'm so grateful for you coming and sharing. Like,
I'm so thankful for y'all providing the space so that I can share. And because you're exactly right. I think getting into those details it's just so important about not feeling good anymore. And, even the detail, because I talk to many people, they're like, they start going to doctors, and that's usually then, okay, and again, I'm a big fan. To pair up with healthcare providers because they're trying to figure out, and the missing piece of the puzzle is alcohol. They're just not sharing with them what that is. And so there's just a huge disconnect there. And, but really talking about the age and we have to be talking about this. And again, in the reason why, like, until you get to, and that's why I loved y'all's interview with Christine about anxiety, until we get to the root of why we're reaching for it in the first place.
yeah.
Going there and asking, and that's something you can learn over time, but again, tackling the big ones first. And, I started a program recently with my coach, Lorna. It's called Breaking Free. And it's because I'm like, we have to stay in the beliefs. If we don't tackle the beliefs, and I give the picture of my daughter's hair being this huge, massive knot. Looks like it is impossible to get out, but it's not. You just have to unwrap. And I see that as the beliefs that we have and the jobs that we've given around alcohol. It's just a tangly mess, right? And we've got to stay in it. And I was like, they laughed at me in the groups. I'm like, y'all, we got to stay in this pig pen. We got to roll around in it and just stay in it so we can get free. And sometimes breaking free of those beliefs is going to take a little time because you need that personal experience to say, wait a minute, I just got through that dinner without any alcohol and that was fine. And I had a good time, or I got through that holiday. And give your body and give your brain those experiences to create those new, jobs and those new experiences that you can, give life and not alcohol.
It's so true. It's the yeah, we always, talk the stories that keep us stuck, and you can think about all the benefits that, or the benefits, the unconscious benefits that we believe alcohol holds, which are those, like, those beliefs, and the based on the jobs that we've given them. And we can think about the stories of, like, well, I can't be an alcoholic, and an alcoholic looks like this, and or I can't be, feeling this physically affecting, this isn't affecting my health physically, even though it is. But it's these stories that we spin, and to your point, how they all tangle together, and we have to unwind them. And
Yeah.
it takes time, and it takes, but like, starting with just, like, asking the question, um, does alcohol, like, how does it benefit me, and how does it not? Like, even just asking, does it benefit me all the time, or not? And starting that curiosity to get to what some of those stories are. And I think that that's where, obviously, the work that we do and what we share with people, I love you representing too. I, as a gray area drinker, Christy is a more gray area drinker, and you as a darker drinker, as you said, like,
Yeah.
it's this way of doing it. Like, the freedom comes not from removing the substance, it comes from untangling, unwinding all of the stories. And so it might take a little while, and that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's where, again, again, I love, Christy, that you were sharing too about, like, when you start to feel good, like,
Yeah.
Yes.
it's a power that in itself is gift, because you're like, wait a minute, I don't recognize this feeling, and I don't want anybody taking this from me.
Totally.
That
Yep.
this is good stuff. And I think it's a powerful question when people are toying with the idea of, like, but it's so good. I'm like, do you really want to go back? Because I can tell you
Yeah.
right now, I know my truth and what that really looked like. And going back, that's not even an option. I don't want anybody, like, and I know it will rob me of this. And I think working on beliefs is so powerful. And for me, I was able to see it because this was probably 2 years ago. I went through this bout of horrific anxiety. Turned out I had good old hormone things going on that needed to be adjusted. But I mean, I was just in panic mode, and I hadn't experienced that in so long. And two things came with that. And again, this shows the power of this work that all of us do. No matter where you're on the scale, it works. And working on those beliefs, because I, one, gained so much empathy for myself, because looking back, I'm like, I lived with this all the time.
Yeah.
That was hard. That was hard. But also, my body, the thought of alcohol was so revolting. It was almost like my body was like, whoa, that will make it so much worse. When years ago, it would have been my quickest go to.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what we saw again during the pandemic was people feel this onslaught of this whole new, wait a minute, what's this stressful, anxious time in this life? And they had never worked on belief, and they still believed it served them. They go back. When you work on these beliefs, your
Yeah.
brain, it works. You have these new neural pathways, this new foundation, and it's like big X. You stay away from that, and let's go to the tools that we know that works. And I was amazed by my body, y'all. I'm like, in my brain, I'm like, this is so cool. This is so cool. We can turn these things around with what we think is impossible. And it's not.
Yeah. That's so good. Can I ask not a technical question, but I thought I read that when it comes to, like, you get to the point where, where you ended up in hospital with liver, like, liver failure, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
That doesn't, that basically you don't get the warning until it's, like, almost too late. Is that correct? Like, yeah.
It can be. And that's where it's the scary thing, where
Yeah.
sometimes people, um, they're getting over time, that yellowing of the skin, but they're still functioning. There's still things. What happened to me, and I think the scary thing also, is that when it's acute, this can come on. Like, I saw that, like, there was some yellow in my eye on, a Friday going to work. Again, important to say that, because it's still functioning just fine, going to work. And then by Sunday, I was in, like, my body was in failure. So
Oh my gosh.
it's so important to know. And again, it's why I share my story, because I don't want people to get to where I was.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I don't want, and I had the opportunity, and it was just heartbreaking. I was able to work with someone and I saw my face in her face. I saw the puffy, I saw the red, and I knew she was not doing well. And I tried and I had this conversation with her about what you just said, Christy, about, I look back on my story and just realized what a gift, because my liver started back. I was sitting in that hospital for days, daily blood work, and what they're looking for, they can do nothing for you. There's nothing they can do. There's not any Russian, like, okay, we can give you this and that's going to get everything working. It was a waiting game. Is my liver going to start working or is it not? And so just praying, like, God, please let it just start back. And I was able to tell her, like, I don't want you in that situation, because sometimes it doesn't start back. And probably 6 months later, it did not start back for her. This young woman that I had spoken to, and again, her life was hard. There was a lot going on. She was giving it tons of jobs and just couldn't imagine, her life without it, and just said, I'll address it then. I'll address it when I get over this next thing.
Mm.
And she did not get that opportunity. And that's a lot of people are like, well, you don't want to do scare tactics. And it's not a scare tactic. It's just very real.
Right.
It's just very real in what can happen. And it looks different for everyone, and it's not, because I have people ask me a lot, and I know where they're getting at, because I would have done the exact same thing. They're sitting in fear. So they want this formula. How much were you drinking? Give me your exact things. Because they're wanting to see for themselves. And I always warn them. I'm like, listen, what it looked like for me is going to be different for you. And I was so thankful for my healthcare providers to really educate me on that. It's frustrating for them. They can't gauge when they see it happen in someone. And, they'll see someone like me come in and present. They've never seen me before. And it's all of a sudden, and she's in liver failure. And then they've got someone else that's been, drinking like a fish for so long. They're not healthy by any means, but they're, still, they can't make any sense of it. And so it's a dangerous game to play. And it just is. So it is important to talk about.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you're talking about this, because it is so important.
Thank you.
So
Yes, we
important.
do. And again, I think as we come together and talk about all of our journeys and what they look like, no matter what, that's the message I want people to hear. No matter where you are on that spectrum, the way that we do this, the way that we untangle this and, tangle from this is so powerful, no matter where you're at.
Well, and it's, a theme, it sounds like shame, and this story you just described, this other woman, like, shame is that thing, that driving force, evil's driving force that keeps us from not wanting to talk about it, from not wanting to share. And so we have to do that counterintuitive thing and, find one person that we can share this with, or our concerns or our worries, or the things that are, it's like all those stories that I spun. I didn't want anyone to like, once I was finally aware of what they were, I didn't want anyone to know what they were.
Right.
But there was also just at some point this need, like, I have to tell somebody, and meeting in that, finding someone that you can share with. My gosh, like, I just think about like the gift of Dr. Jocelyn, and and I think about how that, and sharing our stories here, and whoever does, like, that is what starts to free us from that shame, and gives us that opening, that hope.
Yes, because believe me, I say in the book, I remember I said, shame was my ultimate silencer. It was just my, like, it, and that's where it's so important for us to share, all of us, because what also Dr. Joplin gave me, which I feel like years ago, alcohol, this whole world in general is dark world, and again, it's like the picture of you can't function afterwards. You have to, if you don't go to meetings, you're going to then just fall off the track and you're going to relapse. And it was dark, and we need healthy. And that's why, again, with my diagnosis of cirrhosis, like, I need to be like, people need to see a healthy face on the other side of this. They need to see a face going, wait a minute, she's doing her thing and she's living life and being a mom and going on vacation. I want that. I want that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important for all of us just to keep talking about it so they can say, wait a minute, this different than what I thought it
Yeah.
looked like.
Let's change
And
those
speaking
stories.
truth around it.
Yeah. I love
So
that
good.
for one option of our Tiny Tina is just to like, if you haven't talked about, you know, maybe find one friend, one person that you trust that you can start talking to, right? Because when you do that, it just everything changes. But that's
I
my
love that.
suggestion. What are your guys' Tiny Tinas today?
I mean,
Made
yeah, well, I always have like 17 because I'm like, and this. But no, I think that what Karla has, like, I mean, there's so many beautiful elements of your story. And I think about how messy and you use the word dark, like how dark and messy your story was. And yet the beauty that comes on the other side of that. And from the place of kind of like not like, turning against, like, I'm finally going to do something that's shame, even though that wasn't like a conscious decision, but having this person who met you in that and allowed you kind of like that step forward out of it. So yeah, finding someone and just, it's kind of that radical honesty with ourselves. And when there's so much freedom in meeting the truth of like, you know what, like I really am, I don't want to be drinking anymore and I'm drinking and yet I can't stop. So like, this sucks. Or, yeah, finding that one person. I had called my girlfriend, I called my one girlfriend that I was like, I know she won't judge me and I can share with her. And that was a huge pivotal moment for me. So yeah.
I love that. And yeah, it goes down to, because I think about those small conversations and how we never know like the power and what seed can be planted. And I think it's just when you're keeping this to yourself, that carries such a high pain point. And it's like, it impacts us no matter where you are on it, just not in liking or drinking, or you're scared, physically about, no matter where you're out there. It consumes us and it impacts us in physical ways and emotional ways. And like, that's what I've always gone back to when I started my coaching business, was that I wanted to provide, and it goes back to that hospital room. I wanted to provide a safe, judgment-free zone where someone could just whisper it out for the first time. And just, I want to encourage people, the weight that comes off with just doing that alone and get a glimpse of, what this could look like for you is so powerful. So yes, finding that person, finding that space, but taking that step for yourself, just stepping out of your comfort zone and taking that one step and just realizing how powerful that can be.
So healing. So good.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, Karla, tell everybody where they can find you. And obviously, we will put everything in the show notes so everyone can find it there as well. But where can people find you and the book and your practice and everything?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you can just go to karlaadkins.com and it says the different things that I do. You can also go to the zeroprooflife.com. I coach with 4 other amazing coaches in there, and work with people that have stepped away from alcohol and then trying to figure out how to do this thing called life without it. But we also have amazing challenges in there. So again, you can all find all of this on my website. Also, like I've mentioned, started doing Breaking Free. And that's truly where we stay in these beliefs. And we just stay there for 8 weeks and we bring in the inner critic, that good old shamer voice, and lean into that. And you can find my book on my website or on Amazon. And but yeah, I have just loved this opportunity to talk with y'all again. I'm a fan of your podcast. So thank you for doing what you do. And again, I go back to where the podcast, finding podcasts is where I was like, oh my gosh. And I got to hear that voice that I recognized in myself. So I love what y'all are doing.
Oh. Well, we adore you. And thank you so much. What a gift. What a gift you've been to us and our listeners. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us again this week. You can find all of our episodes at butjesusdrankwine.com, and make sure you follow us over on the gram at Love Life Sober with Christy and Mead at I'm Not Sober, I'm Free.
To learn more about what we do, you can visit our websites at meadhollandshirley.com and lovelifesober.com.
take a screenshot of this podcast and share it with a friend or two.
And don't forget to subscribe so you don't have to worry about missing a single episode. And if you love what we're doing, please leave us a review on Apple or Spotify.
This helps more women who are feeling stuck and alone in the overdrinking cycle to find hope and encouragement.
Thanks, ladies. We so appreciate you. We'll see you next week.